Okay, example 3 is a lot like example 1. We just have to write as a matrix and do the same thing. -1, -1, -10, 3, 4, and 24. Okay, remember, we're aiming at a matrix that has a 2 by 2 matrix and a 0 here, and then other numbers depending on what math we do. Right, so inspecting my matrix, I can see that my first row has a 1. That's good, but it's negative. So the first thing we're going to do is take that first row and multiply it by a -1. That will give that. So we can replace the first row with 1, 1, -10. Okay, so if we take row 1, I'm going to take the row 1 that we started with, and if I multiply row 1 by a 3 and then combine it with row 2, I'll be able to get a 0 in the first column, second row. So -1, -1, -10. And notice I'm kind of skipping the notation just to speed things up a little bit. -3, -3, -30. Now I'm going to combine that with 2, 3, 4, and 24. So I get a 0, a 1, and -6. Okay. Let's rewrite that. Now, all this rewriting, it doesn't have to happen, but I'm trying to model this the way, if you're using the book, it's going to look pretty similar to what I'm doing. All right, so remember, this is x and this is y. The first column is x, the second column is y. And so just taking row 2, that means that y is equal to -6. And I'm going to take that and substitute it into row 1. X plus y equals -10. And when I add 6 to both sides, I'll get x equals -4. All right, let's go on to the same idea, but a 3 by 3 matrix. Solving 3 equations for 3 variables. 1. Okay, again, row 1 looks pretty good. It's got a 1 in the first column. So I'm going to use that row to eliminate on the second. So row 1, I'm going to multiply that by a -2. And I'll get -2, -4, +4, and 14. When I combine that with row 2, my new and improved row 2 has a 0, which is what I want. A 1, that's kind of nice. And a 2, and it looks like I get a 4. So let's rewrite the matrix with our new row 2. The reason I do this is because it helps me figure out where I am at and what I need to do next. I think I'd have a tough time if I wasn't rewriting. Okay, this looks good. I've got 1 in the first row, first column. I have a 0 in the first column, second row and a 1 in the second column, second row. So I'm going to use the first row in its original form with the, I'm going to take the first row and I'm going to multiply it by a -1 so I can zero out the 1 in the third row. So 1 and multiply that by a -1. And I get that, which I'm going to combine with 3. 1. When I do that, I get a 0, a -4, a -1, and a -2. So again, a lot of rewriting on these matrices. And my new and improved row 3, 0, -4, -1, -2. Okay, so I'm going to take my new row 2, and by the way, when the book does this, they start adding primes to tell you how many times it's been changed. I just kind of use prime once. My new row 2, which is 0, 1, 2, and 4, and I'm going to multiply that by a 4, and then combine it with row 3. To cancel out the middle, which is the y. Zero, 0, 9, and 14. Now I have an error, so I'm going to stop the video and figure out where it is. Simple combining error. When I combine 8 and -1, I get a 7. And I knew that what I needed was, so this gives me, if I write it back in, and I'm going to skip writing the matrix again because now I can start back substituting. This says that 7z is equal to 14. So I knew I had an error because I knew it wouldn't be an even number. The thing I've noticed in these problems on the quiz is they almost always turn out to be integers. Well, I haven't seen anything but integers, so I'm just kind of covering myself. So z equals 2, okay, with my modified last row. Now I'm going to move back to row 2 and a back substitute. So I have a 0, which is 0x. I have 1y plus 2z equals 4. Now I'm going to solve for y. And it looks like when I multiply, I'm going to get y plus 4 equals 4. I subtract 4 from both sides, I get y equals 0. And now I'm going to take that x, z, and y, and I'm going to plug them into the first row. X plus 2y minus 2z equals -7. X plus 2 times 0 minus 2 times 2 equals -7. And I get x plus 0, I'm not going to write that, minus 4 equals -7. Add 4 to both sides. X equals -3. Done.